This video is brought to you by Sailrite. Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this tutorial video, we'll show you how to recover the backrests on a golf cart. We'll recover them with a quality marine vinyl fabric from Sailrite. The style and configuration of your backrest may vary slightly from what we show in this video, but the principles covered within should still apply. Our golf cart backrest is simply screwed from the back with 4 screws. We remove those screws and the backrest separates from the golf cart. Before removing the old vinyl fabric, first we need to mark up the cushion to make it easier for patterning. Since this backrest has a lot of shape, we'll label the top and bottom edges not only on the vinyl but also on the backer board. To give our seat a tailored look, we're going to make it or sew it together with 3 separate panels. The first is the top plate, which does incorporate a 2-tone color. Then on the sides is the boxing. Those 3 pieces, not including that 2-tone color, will be sewn together to form the cushion. The brown racing stripe is a preference and not a rule. With a Sharpie marker, I'm marking the corner of where I want the boxing to start and stop. As this is traced, try to follow the contour of the cushion, if any. And then I'll do the same for the top edge, where the boxing will be attached to the top plate. Basically, where it's being marked is where the seam will be sewn together to join the boxing to the top plate. This line is typically about a 1/4 inch down from the top edge. At the corners, we want a gentle, rounded corner. So I'm going to use my Sharpie marker here and round the corners off. This will give a better appearance to the cushion, and it will also make it easier to sew it together. This only needs to be done on one side of the cushion. We will use this same pattern when we go to pattern the opposite end or side. Now we can remove the old vinyl. To do this, remove the staples. At this point, we can check our backer board and the foam to see if it can be reused. If not, you may have to cut a new backer board or replace the foam. If you have to replace the foam, Sailrite recommends a high-density polyurethane foam in a medium firmness. Now we'll measure the backer board. This is the board, not the foam, and find the center location along the bottom edge and the top edge. Our seat back is not a perfect rectangle, so we need to take this measurement to determine how to cut our plate to size. So on the top edge, our measurement is 7.5 inches, and on the bottom edge, I believe it is 8 inches. That's a measurement of half of the backrest from the backer board edges. We'll also measure the backer board for height, and we'll find the center position for that as well. We'll do that on the left side and the right side. We'll write that halfway measurement on the backer board. For us on this side, it's 4 3/4 inches. On the opposite side, again measuring the backer board, it is about the same, 4 13/16 of an inch. We want our backrest to have a 2-tone color, so basically a racing stripe in the center. And we've determined that we want the finished size of the racing stripe to be about 10 inches. So to accomplish 10 inches, we need to add a 1/2 inch to each edge, making the racing stripe 11 inches. We'll measure our old vinyl fabric to determine the height of the plate overall. This is the amount that will wrap around the top, the face of the plate, and the bottom of the plate to the backer board. It's about 20 inches as cut here. Let's go ahead and cut the boxing or the sides of the cushion out of our old vinyl fabric, cutting along the lines that we marked on the sides of our old vinyl fabric. This boxing that we're cutting out has enough fabric to wrap around the backer board, but not really enough to pull on. So we'll actually be extending it along the edge that's stapled to the backer board, just so we have extra vinyl fabric to pull on and to tension while we staple it to the backer board. We'll be doing that when we create the actual side boxing out of our new fabric. We've already determined that our plate's height needs to be at least 22 inches. It's always good to give it a little bit of an extra height as well so you can wrap around the backer board. And we've determined that we want to cut the width to 11 inches. So here we're using our clear acrylic ruler and marking the underside of our vinyl fabric. This is the brown fabric for the racing stripe at 11 inches in width. And now we'll use the rotary cutter and the cutting mat and the clear acrylic ruler to cut our strip to size. Here you can see the overall height of our strip is 22 inches, so we gave ourselves 2 extra inches than what was already previously stapled onto the backer board, and the width is 11 inches. The finished width will be 10 inches as we take up a half-inch seam allowance on both sides. On the plate, we also have white fabric on the left and right side. We're going to cut it to size, which will be oversized. 4 inches should give us enough plate material. It will be slightly oversized, but will be cut down later on. So we're going to make this strip about 22 inches, a little bit longer than that, but that's no big deal, by 4 inches, and we need 2 of them. Okay, here's our plate. So we need to join the white sides to the middle brown section. And to do that, outside surfaces should be facing each other. So outside surfaces are facing each other, and we want to sew these 2 portions together with a straight stitch that's about 6 millimeters in length and about a ½ inch from the raw edge of the fabric. We're using the deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide to help guide our fabric assembly to keep it straight as we sew this straight stitch along the side of our assembly. Then we'll splay it open. That was our first stitch of what we call a semi-flat felled seam. Now we'll perform the top stitch. This stitch goes through the ½ inch tail on the underside, and we want to sew in our white assembly, not the brown. And we are sewing this stitch about an 1/8 inch away from our splayed open portion of our first stitch. And we are pulling the fabric both left and right to keep the fabric splayed open along that stitch, being careful to keep our stitches nice and straight as possible. Why are we sewing on the white side and not the brown side? That's a preference and not a rule, but we want to repeat that for all the other panels that have to be joined to this. That same procedure should be done for the opposite side where we need to join white to it as well. We've already done it here, we did not show that. So here's our completed top stitch. Looks great. With the plate wrong side up on the table, we can lay our foam on top of that towards the middle position and label the top portion of our plate and the bottom portion of our plate. So that matches the top and the bottom of our foam assembly with the backer board already glued onto it. We recommend folding the plate in half lengthwise and heighthwise and cutting small triangular notches at the fold to indicate where the center is of the plate in both directions. Now we'll open it up and fold it in the opposite direction, doing the same to those corners at the fold as well. Taking a look at our backer board and our plate, we measured 4 3/4 inches from the center position. So what we want to do is we want to mark towards the top portion of our plate 4 3/4 inches, and also towards the bottom portion of our plate 4 3/4 inches on the same side that it would be when wrapped around the foam in the backer board. Now we want to do that same thing on the opposite side. So we go back to our board, and this time it's a measurement of 4 13/16. So from the middle mark, we mark it on the bottom side, and from the middle mark, we mark it towards the top side of our plate. Using our clear acrylic ruler, we'll strike a line right down the center of our plate from notch to notch. Since our seat back is not uniform, we'll take a look at the bottom edge of the backer board where we indicated the center position. For us, it's 8 inches from the center position to the edge of the backer board. So from the center position, we'll mark over directly across from the mark we made on each side 8 inches. So 8 inches on that side and 8 inches on this side where we placed the mark that was 4 3/4 inches on this side. Now, at the top edge, our measurement was 7.5 inches. So at the mark, we measure over from the center position, that line we struck down the center of our plate, 7.5 inches, and place a mark there. And we'll do the same on the opposite side. Now we have a line that we can strike down that's obviously not a perfect rectangle, so it's slightly canted, and we'll use our clear acrylic ruler to strike from line to line, and we will go through our entire length of fabric to do this. We'll follow that same procedure for the opposite side. We did not show that. Now we have lines that indicate where our plate needs to be cut. If we've done it correctly, and if our plate is perfectly square, at least until we cut it on the sides, we should be able to pin it together folded down the middle of it. So we can pin it with multi-use pins with the edges directly on top of each other, because basically that canted edge should be the same on both sides since it's centered in the middle position. Now once it's pinned in position, we are going to use the clear acrylic ruler and cut 1/4 inch away or inside of that line towards our plate assembly. We want to take away 1/2 inch of the plate's size to make it fit very snugly over top of our foam. We know that seam allowance will take out even more, but that really makes for a tight fitting cover. So again, we're taking out 1/4 inch from our line, which basically takes out 1/2 inch because it's obviously the same on both sides. So now our plate is cut to our irregular size of our foam and our backer board. That took away our center position, so we're going to use our scrap before throwing it away and find our center position one more time and mark it on the underside of the vinyl on both sides. This is our center position. And so we don't lose it, we're going to cut notches, little triangles, going no deeper than 1/4 inch at that center position. Next, we will grab our boxing or side piece that we cut from our old cushion and use it to trace out our new boxing piece. We've laid it on the back side of our vinyl material and are using a standard pencil to trace around it. We will add some excess to the part that has to be pulled around the backer board and stapled. So at the bottom edge, we will have it extend a little bit further than it is now. We will not show that. Here it is after we've done that. We've also marked the B for bottom and T for top on the appropriate side. We did not add seam allowance. Why? Because we want a tight-fitting cover that will compress our foam. Using the first one as a pattern that we cut out, we'll use it to create a second one for the opposite side. Notice that it is facing up as we draw on the underside of the material. Then we'll cut it out. So these are exact mirrors of each other, but they're just facing in a different direction. Using our old vinyl where we marked the center, we want to transfer that mark to the underside of our boxing pieces. We'll cut a small triangle at that location with our scissors, not going deeper than 1/4 inch, just so we don't lose it, and we can also see it from the opposite side. Lay the boxing pieces on top of your plate so right sides are up against each other, and be sure that you get the top and the bottom side on the correct side of your boxing piece when compared to the top plate. Now we'll start sewing at the center position, sewing 1/2 inch from the raw edge. And this time the boxing is on top of our plate. When we get to the corner, go very slowly and push the boxing up so that it's up against the deluxe magnetic guide. If you don't have that, you can put masking tape on the bed of your sewing machine and use that as a guide. So notice here I'm going one stitch at a time very slowly around this corner and pulling my fabric so I don't stretch it, but yet pull it so that the edges match up as I sew it. We're sewing a straight stitch about a ½ inch away from the raw edges of the fabric, which are lined up with each other. This is the first stitch of our semi-flat felled seam. So just like we did with the plate, we'll be creating a top stitch later on. We'll sew all the way to the bottom edge. After that's done, this entire assembly will be flipped over, and we will sew from the center position the opposite direction. Now this requires that the boxing be on the underside, or the side pieces are on the underside. So it's a little bit more difficult because you really can't see those as well. But the task is still the same, especially when you reach the corner as I'm doing here. Try to line up the edges so that they are directly on top of each other as you sew. You can place one hand on the boxing on the underside and twist it or rotate it as you work around the corner. Just go slow when you sew the corner. If you need to make more abrupt changes, bury the needle by rotating the balance wheel, lift the presser foot, then make the adjustment, lower the presser foot, and continue to sew. This completes the first stitch. Now we'll do the top stitch to complete the semi-flat felled seam. We've decided that we want to place this top stitch in the plate assembly and not necessarily in the boxing assembly. So the tail is folded towards the top plate, and we will keep this stitch about an 1/8 inch away from the splayed out portion of our first stitch. So it's about an 1/8 inch away, and we want to pull slightly on the fabric left and right as we sew up to it, so that it is laying directly on that first stitch. The fold is, that is, and we are sewing through the 1/2 inch tail on the underside. You can't see it, but we are being assured that we do that. Now, when we reach the corner, there will be a lot of bulk fabric. It will have a tendency to bulk up in front of the presser foot and behind the presser foot. So you can see here I'm working diligently to smooth out the fabric about an inch before I sew, and I'm also going to keep track of the fabric behind the presser foot because I don't want it to get caught on that black arm that comes down slightly past the presser foot. So pay attention to the bulk up. This will only be at the corner. Notice the bulk right past the presser foot, and I moved the bulk away from that black metal arm. Now I can sew confidently, knowing that the fabric will feed well and won't get caught on anything, and I continue to smooth it out in front. Now we're pretty much to the straightaway. This is a pretty easy sewing task here, but we're coming upon the second corner. So we will go slow again and repeat that process yet again, just as we did for the first. Notice the tail, it's laying towards the plate, so I'm sewing through the 1/2 inch tail. We've skipped ahead here to the end, and that completes the boxing to the plate. Now we need to repeat that process for the other side. We will not show that. We're going to reuse our foam and our backer board, but we're also going to wrap it in what we call a silk film. Using silk film will give us two advantages. One, it will make it easier to slip our cover over the foam. The cover is usually always made so it's nice and snug over the foam. And second, it will provide a little bit more water resistance. So when water finds its way in through the vinyl stitch holes, typically this silk film will help prevent the water from getting to the foam. It's a prevention. It doesn't make it totally waterproof, but it does help. So we want to cut enough silk film that we can overlap the sections of the silk film by at least 12 inches or more. In our situation here, this seat back is rather small, so we're actually doubling it up a little bit, though that is typically not necessary. Then we'll wrap the excess to the back side, and we'll cut away some of that. It's just too much. Now we will take our cover and slip it over the foam. Because of the silk film, it slides in easily. Without it, you'll struggle a little bit more. It's possible to do it without it, but it is definitely more difficult. Now, we marked the center positions on our backer board, and we can see right through the silk film. So now what we'll do with the notches that we've placed into the tan fabric, those triangular notches, we will line it up with the marks we made in the backer board and staple it at those locations so it's centered perfectly. Now, if your piece is small enough, like this seat back, you only need one staple. If it's larger, you may need 2 or 3 staples to hold it in place, because we want to make sure that it is still centered and the seams at the corners lay on the corners. So one staple is enough just to hold it in place as we check to make sure that everything still looks great. So we look at the front side and it looks good, and now we'll look at each one of the corners to see where the seam rests. If it seems like it's correct, we'll continue to staple it in place. All 4 corners look good. The seam's right on the corner. Now, when we pull that seam, because that's what we're going to concentrate on next, the seams at the corner, when we pull that seam snugly with someone pressing on the foam to compress it, we'll place one staple right on the seam, and there will be some wrinkles in the plate material. Do not worry about that. Right now, what we're trying to do is make sure that seam's at the corner, and even if it goes back slightly and creates a little bit of wrinkle in the plate and the sides, we will not be concerned about that. We just want to staple each one of the seams in place for this seat back. After we have the cushion secured at the corners and also on the sides where the boxing is, then we will staple around the entire perimeter. And we will smooth out the wrinkles, making sure that the cover on the top side looks great as we staple around the perimeter. Now we'll come to the boxing sides. We'll pull on the vinyl, compress the foam, and place about 3 staples at the center location there to secure it, and do the same on the opposite side. I like to have a second helper to help compress the foam. This means I don't have to pull as much on the vinyl as I staple it in place. I do have to make sure it's firm, but compressing the foam does that automatically. Now everything's secure. Inspect your seat back. Make sure you're happy with it, looking at the top side and the sides, and if it looks good, you can continue to staple around the entire perimeter to the back side. Notice there are a lot of wrinkles. That's because there's a lot of shape and this cushion is rather small, but those wrinkles are only on the back side. If you look at the edge where the backer board is, the vinyl is pulled snugly there, so none of those wrinkles will show up. So now we can staple around the entire perimeter.
You get over my hands or somebody's hands.
Once we have it stapled around the 4 sides, we will then concentrate on the corners. So here we're going to fast forward to a point where we have it stapled on all 4 sides and concentrate on how we staple the corner, which has a lot of excess fabric. All those wrinkles on the back side can either be cut away with scissors or left there, especially since we have a plastic cover that'll fit over the back of our backrest. Here we are cutting away the excess right up to where we stapled around the entire perimeter of our cushion. And that silk film on the back side will also cut the excess of that away. Silk film does not need to cover the backer board. In fact, usually there are a few holes in the backer board to allow air to escape when an occupant sits back on the cushion. And if the silk film were left there, then typically the air would not easily escape. Our golf cart seat back cushion is now complete. Coming up next is the materials and tools list. We used Morbrin Hex for the copper or tan color in this cushion, but Sailrite carries many more textures of marine quality vinyls that look awesome. Check them out at the Sailrite website today. Now all we have to do is reinstall the seat backs using our new stainless steel screws, and the T-nuts that we installed or were installed in the backer board. If you have any questions about the materials or the tools that we used in this video, be sure to give us a call or email us. We're glad to help. For more free videos like this, be sure to check out the Sailrite website or subscribe to the Sailrite YouTube channel. Here are some related videos that may interest you. When subscribing to the YouTube channel, be sure to click the bell so that you're notified of new videos that come out. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.